We say welcome to another edition of our videos on Benjamin Academics Bate on YouTube, and on Facebook we are called Benjamin Academics. You can follow us there to get more updates and to always get our notes when we upload them day by day. Today we are going to be talking about a very important concept in the life of African history that many Africans have not yet understood the mystery behind it, and many Cameroonians, especially those who are writing the advanced level history, have not yet understood. Today Benjamin Academics is going to be giving you a deep explanation on how it is going to be functioning. Now that topic that many students get confused most at times is called nationalism. The topic nationalism as a whole. Now, first of all, I would like to introduce the topic nationalism, and I'll give the factors that led to the outbreak of nationalism in Africa. First of all, I want to create or to explain to you what awareness is all about, explain to you what consciousness is all about, and to explain what reawakening is all about. I'll be explaining these three concepts. When I'll explain them, I'll give you now the definition of what of nationalism. First of all, awareness was created as a result of the First World War, and it also created awareness in the Second World War. That was why Africans stood their ground, that they wanted to fight for what? For independence from European powers. From the reawakening, they were already sleeping. European powers took over them. They were sleeping, they never knew anything. So when they wake up from sleep, they say no to European rule. And what? It was a consciousness. They had that conscious mind that if European could be killed during the war, then they can kill European, or they can rule their own territory by themselves. So what then is a topic, or what then is a term? Nationalism. Nationalism refers to what? The awareness, the consciousness, the reawakening that develops what? In the minds of the Africans. After what? After the First World War. When then was the First World War? The First World War in 1914. It started in 1914, July of 1914 to February of July of 1914 to August. That was when the war started actually in Europe. Now, when this development came to the minds of Africans as a result of the First World War, the Second World War brought them with a true knowledge of what? Of self-governance. So nationalism is the awareness, consciousness, reawakening that developed in the minds of the Africans after the First World War, and was developed or portrayed afterward, after the Second World War. This was because Africans were economically exploited, politically they were dominated, and socially they were discriminated. We are going to be examining the factors that led to what? The growth of nationalism in Africa, or how the Second World War was a contributing factor to what? To the rise of African nationalism. Let's take point one. First of all, we'll talk about what? The ills of colonialism. How did the ills of colonialism influence the rise of African nationalism? The ills of colonialism can be classified under economic, political, and social reasons that influence what? The rise of African nationalism. Now, talking about the ills of colonialism, we'll be looking at it on this other part, where we'll talk about what? The political factors. Now, the political factors that led to the outbreak of nationalism as a result of the ills of colonialism was, first, the loss of political power by who? By some African chiefs. Some African chiefs lost their political power as a result of what? The coming to existence of European powers in Africa. Their powers were being lost, were being taken away from them by colonial powers. As a result of that, many Africans stood their ground that they wanted nationalism. Second part, under the political factors or the political ills of nationalism, we have what? The disappearance of some African kingdoms or empires. Now, this disappearance of some African empires or kingdoms, we have like the Songhai Empire, we have the Mali Empire, we have the Kanem-Borno Empire. This empire were disappeared by some of these European powers. As a result of that, Africans stood their ground that they wanted nationalism. They wanted self-government. we talk about what? The split of ethnic groups. The split of ethnic groups was as a result of the partition of Africa. Remember, Africa was partitioned during what? During the Mandate period. That was after the First World War, when the League of Nations came to existence. It partitioned African territories. Like Cameroon, for example, was partitioned under Mandate B territory of the League of Nations, controlled by Britain and France. When this territory were partitioned under this European nation, these nations never loved it. So why? They stood their ground for the growth of what? Of nationalism. We also have the elimination of what? Of African rules. Africa had their several rules that governs them before the coming of the European powers. But when these European powers came to Africa, they eliminated these rules. So Africans were unhappy. Thus, the rise of what? Of African nationalism. And last part, under the political factors, under the use of nationalism, we will talk about what? The loss of African rights. Africans lost their right of control. Thus, they wanted self-government. And thus, the growth of what? African nationalism. Let us look at the socio-cultural use of nationalism. Socio-cultural use of nationalism was first this organization of what? African social lives. Africans had their own lifestyle, their own way they reacted in their economy. As a result of what? The disorganization of their social life, it caused what? The rise of African nationalism. We also have what? The loss of African cultures and tradition. The loss of African cultures and tradition also did what? Influence the rise of African nationalism. Like, first of all, African cultures and traditions, like we had the killing of twins and all the others. When European powers came, they abolished this system. Africans were unhappy. Thus, the growth of what? African nationalism. Last point, under the socio-cultural factors that led to the growth of African nationalism, we have the loss of African work of art. You know, Africans had their own system that they used to take up their own activities in Africa. So as a result of the loss of work of art in Africa, African people decided to do what? To step up for what? The growth of what? Nationalism. And we'll talk about what? The economic factor. The economic factor was one of the greatest parts that influenced what? The rise of African nationalism. Looking at the economic factor that led or that contributed to the growth of African nationalism, we can talk about what? The low prices of African goods. At that time, when European powers came to Africa, they used to buy European goods at lower prices. Some African kings, some African rulers, some African natives were unhappy about these activities that used to be carried out in their territory. For this reason, they stood up for what? For the growth of what? African nationalism. We also have what? High taxes on African goods. African goods used to have high taxes. European powers placed high taxes on African raw materials, on African goods, where they could it could not be easily bought by who? By some of these Africans. That is, Africans could not buy their own goods in their own territory at higher prices, at lower prices. So as a result of this, Africans were unhappy. For this reason, the growth of what? African nationalism. And last part, we can talk of forced labor. You know, forced labor. Africans were being forced to work in plantations. As a result of being forced to work in plantations, these Africans were unhappy about it. For that reason, they stood up for the growth of nationalism. Let us be looking at the last point under the economic factor that led to the growth of African nationalism, where we'll talk about what? The absence of manufacturing industries in Africa. Africans never had manufacturing industries in their own territory, where all resources were being exploited from Africa to Europe. For this reason, Africans were unhappy, and thus what? The growth of what? Of African nationalism. Let us now look at what? Other causes of what? Of the rise of African nationalism. Remember, sometimes they might ask a question: to what extent were the use of nationalism an influence to the growth of African nationalism? This is how you should answer the question. You talk about the economic, the political, and the socio-cultural, and then you talk about other factors, as with what we are going to do. Or, if should in case a question was placed before you, to what extent were the Second World War a contributing factor to the rise of African nationalism? What we are going to be discussing now, it is the contributions of the Second World War to the rise of African nationalism. Now, inflation. The Second World War brought about inflation in Africa. As a result of this, there were, first of all, let me explain to you what inflation is all about. Inflation is a persistent increase in the general price level of goods and services as a result of the Second World War, where many things were being destroyed and there were high prices of goods and services. Now, as a result of that, European goods were cheap, but African goods, there were high prices on goods and services where Africans could not buy them. So for this reason, they needed to stand up for what? For nationalism. They wanted self-government. Let us look at what? The next point, the rise of trade unions. There were trade unions that rose against colonialism, against the evils of colonialism. They stood up, they stood their ground that they never wanted any rule from what? From the European powers. Thus, the growth of what? African nationalism. We have also Western education. Western education also influenced or greatly influenced the rise of African nationalism, because some African elites were being trained, like Dr. Francis Kwame Nkrumah was trained. When he came back, he said colonial rule was not a very important factor. He disagreed with colonial rule in Africa. So he said Africans should be on a self-government. That was why when he was in prison, he could easily write letters on toilet rolls to send to the people to organize rally and strikes against the European colonialism in Africa. Thus, the rise of what? African nationalism. Lastly, we'll be talking about unemployment. How did unemployment influence the growth of African nationalism? There was unemployment in Europe, where several those Africans who fought as military during the First World War and the Second World War were unemployed in Africa. They wanted self-government so they could regain employment in their own territory. So these were some of the causes, or how the Second World War influenced the rise of African nationalism in Africa. If they ask a question, to what extent were the Second World War an influence to the rise of African nationalism? You talk about what? Unemployment, Western education, the rise of trade union, inflation. Now, you can also talk about other causes of the rise of African nationalism, like the rise of what? USA and the rise of what? Of Russia. So these were some of the factors of the rise of African nationalism. Dear viewers, we say welcome and thank you for watching this video on Benjamin Academics. Do not forget to like our video, share, subscribe to our channel, and we are going to be putting up more videos on this. In our next video, we are going to be looking at nationalism in the Gold Coast. Thank you for watching.